was starving, terrified, and alone in a hostile camp. But when she saw the hungry eyes of the chief's young son, she did something no one expected. What happened next would shake the Comanche tribe to its core. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the vast prairie stretching endlessly toward the horizon. It was the summer of 1867, and the Comanche territory remained one of the last untamed frontiers, where the native people still held dominion over the land their ancestors had roamed for countless generations. The tall grass swayed rhythmically in the hot wind, creating waves across the landscape like an ocean of gold and amber. Sarah Bennett had been traveling with a small wagon train heading toward the newly established settlement near Fort Griffin, when everything changed. The 24-year-old woman with flowing auburn hair and emerald green eyes had left her life in Missouri behind after her parents succumbed to illness, seeking a fresh start in the rugged Texas frontier. She possessed a resilient spirit forged by hardship, yet maintained a gentle heart that saw humanity in all people, regardless of their differences. The attack came swiftly at dawn 3 days ago. A Comanche raiding party descended upon the wagon train like thunder across the plains. Sarah remembered the chaos vividly, the screaming, the gunfire, the desperate scramble for survival. She had hidden beneath her wagon, clutching a small leather pouch containing the last of her dried meat and hardtack biscuits. When the dust settled and silence fell, she emerged to find herself alone among the wreckage, the sole survivor taken captive by the warriors. Now she sat bound near the edge of the Comanche encampment, her wrists tied with rawhide strips that cut into her pale skin. The camp consisted of approximately 30 teepees arranged in a circular pattern, with cooking fires sending thin columns of smoke into the cloudless sky. Women moved about their daily tasks, casting curious and sometimes hostile glances toward the white captive. Children played nearby, their laughter a strange contrast to Sarah's dire circumstances. Chief Tahunka, whose name meant Great Wolf in the Comanche tongue, was a formidable presence in the camp. At 32 years old, he stood tall and powerfully built, with broad shoulders and a muscular frame that spoke of countless battles and hunts. His long black hair was adorned with eagle feathers earned through acts of bravery, and his bronze skin bore the scars of a warrior's life. His face was striking, strong angular features with high cheekbones, and intense dark eyes that seemed to pierce through to one's very soul. He wore buckskin leggings and a vest decorated with intricate beadwork, and carried himself with the unmistakable authority of a leader who had earned his people's respect through both wisdom and strength. Sarah had heard stories about Comanche chiefs, tales of brutality and savagery that circulated among frontier settlers. Yet as she observed Tahunka from a distance over the past 3 days, she noticed something unexpected. He moved through the camp with purpose and dignity, stopping to speak with his people, checking on the elderly, and settling disputes with measured judgment. There was intelligence in his eyes, not the mindless violence she had been taught to expect. Her thoughts were interrupted by a small figure approaching cautiously. A boy, no more than 7 years old, crept toward her hiding spot near a cluster of sage bushes where she had been relegated. He had the same striking features as Chief Tahunka. The resemblance was unmistakable. This had to be the chief's son. The child's name, she would later learn, was Little Hawk, and his dark eyes held a mixture of curiosity and hunger that made Sarah's heart ache with recognition. The boy stared at her with wide eyes, his small frame appearing too thin beneath his simple deerskin clothing. Sarah noticed how his gaze kept drifting to the small leather pouch she still clutched protectively. She had been rationed no food since her capture, and her own stomach cramped with hunger, but seeing this child's obvious need stirred something deep within her. "Are you hungry, little one?" Sarah whispered softly, though she doubted the boy understood English. She slowly reached into her pouch, her movements careful and deliberate to avoid startling him. Inside remained only a small piece of dried meat and 2 hardtack biscuits, the absolute last of her provisions, her only hope of sustaining herself through whatever ordeal lay ahead. Little Hawk's eyes widened as he watched her withdraw the precious food. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she contemplated what she was about to do. Every instinct of self-preservation screamed at her to conserve these meager rations, to hoard them against an uncertain future. She was a prisoner with no guarantee of food, no promise of survival. Yet looking at this child's hungry face, she found herself unable to hold back. "Here," she said gently, breaking the larger piece of dried meat in half and offering it along with one of the biscuits to the boy. "Take it. You need it more than I do." Little Hawk hesitated, glancing back toward the center of the camp where his father stood in discussion with several warriors. The boy's internal conflict was evident. He was clearly hungry, yet uncertain whether accepting food from the white captive was permitted. Sarah kept her hand extended, maintaining a warm, encouraging smile, despite her own fear and hunger. Finally, the child's need overcame his hesitation. He reached out with small, tentative fingers and took the offered food. The gratitude that flooded his young face was immediate and heartbreaking. He held the precious morsels as if they were treasures, carefully examining them before taking a small, savoring bite of the meat. "It's okay," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Eat slowly, little one. Make it last." What neither Sarah nor Little Hawk realized was that they were being watched. Chief Tahunka had noticed his son's absence and had tracked the boy's movements with the practiced eye of a protective father. From his position near the council area, partially concealed behind a teepee, the chief observed the entire exchange. His expression remained unreadable, carved from stone, but his mind raced with conflicting thoughts. The white woman was a captive, an enemy by all traditional measures. Her people had driven the Comanche from their hunting grounds, broken treaties, and brought disease and destruction to the plains. Tahunka had personally lost family members to conflicts with white settlers and soldiers. His own wife, Little Hawk's mother, had died 2 winters ago from an illness brought by the white man, leaving the chief to raise his son alone. The grief and anger still burned within him, fueling his raids and his determination to protect what remained of his people's way of life. Yet what he witnessed now challenged his hardened perspective. This captive woman, facing an uncertain fate and clearly suffering from hunger herself, had given her last food to his child without hesitation. There had been no calculation in her gesture, no attempt to curry favor or manipulate. It had been an act of pure compassion, one human being responding to another's need despite the dangers and divisions between them. Tahunka continued watching as Little Hawk sat beside the white woman, eating slowly as she had instructed. Sarah spoke softly to the boy, her tone gentle and maternal, despite the language barrier. She pointed to different objects around them, teaching him English words: sky, bird, tree, as if they were simply 2 people sharing a peaceful moment rather than captor and captive. Little Hawk listened intently, repeating the strange sounds with childish enthusiasm, his earlier hunger temporarily forgotten in the joy of this unexpected connection. The chief felt something shift within his chest, a crack in the armor of hatred and mistrust he had built around his heart. He thought of his son, growing up without a mother's gentle touch, surrounded only by the harsh realities of warfare and survival. Little Hawk needed more than just physical sustenance. He needed the kind of kindness and compassion that seemed to flow naturally from this white woman, despite her own suffering. As the afternoon shadows lengthened across the prairie, Tahunka made a decision that would shock his entire tribe and change the course of several lives forever. He stepped forward from his concealed position, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the ground. Sarah looked up, her face immediately draining of color as she recognized the chief approaching. Fear flickered in her green eyes, and she instinctively pulled back, expecting punishment for interacting with the child. Little Hawk jumped to his feet, still clutching the remaining portion of food, his expression caught between joy at seeing his father and worry for his new friend. The boy began speaking rapidly in Comanche, gesturing excitedly toward Sarah, clearly trying to explain what had transpired. Tahunka raised his hand, silencing his son with a gentle but firm gesture. The entire camp seemed to pause, sensing something significant was about to occur. Warriors stopped their activities, women ceased their work, and even the children grew quiet, all eyes turning toward their chief and the white captive. Chief Tahunka stood before Sarah, his imposing figure blocking out the late afternoon sun. His dark eyes studied her intently, searching for something beyond the surface fear that most captives displayed. Sarah forced herself to meet his gaze, her heart pounding against her ribcage like a trapped bird. She had heard too many stories of what happened to white women taken by Comanche warriors, and now, having dared to interact with the chief's son, she feared her fate was sealed. The chief spoke, his voice deep and resonant, carrying across the silent camp. Though Sarah could not understand the Comanche words, she heard something unexpected in his tone. Not anger, but contemplation, perhaps even a hint of respect. He gestured toward the nearly empty leather pouch still clutched in her trembling hands, then to his son, and finally to the bindings around her wrists. Little Hawk spoke up eagerly, his young voice animated as he continued explaining to his father. The boy held up the remaining food, showing it proudly as evidence of the white woman's generosity. Several elders had gathered nearby, their weathered faces etched with curiosity and suspicion. Among them was Gray Bear, an elder warrior whose hatred for white settlers was well known throughout the tribe. His son had been killed by cavalry soldiers the previous spring. "Tahunka, you cannot be considering what I think you are considering," Gray Bear said sharply in Comanche, his voice carrying the weight of his years and losses. "This white woman is our enemy. Her people have taken everything from us, our land, our buffalo, our families. Showing her mercy is a betrayal of all who have fallen." The chief turned to face the elder, his expression calm but unyielding. "I saw what she did, Gray Bear. She gave her last food to Little Hawk, knowing she might starve. When have our enemies ever shown such compassion? When have they seen us as human beings worthy of kindness?" "It is a trick," another warrior called out from the growing crowd. "The white people are full of deception. She seeks only to save herself." Tahunka shook his head slowly. "If that were true, she would have kept her food, hoarded it for her own survival. Instead, she chose to feed a child, my child, without knowing I watched, without expecting reward." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "My son's mother died from the white man's sickness. This is true. My heart has been filled with rage and grief, but I have also taught Little Hawk that a true warrior recognizes honor, even in an unexpected place. What kind of chief would I be if I punished genuine kindness?" The camp erupted in murmured discussions, some voices supportive, others vehemently opposed. Sarah watched the exchange with mounting anxiety, able to discern from body language and tone that her fate hung in the balance. She instinctively moved closer to Little Hawk, and the boy, in turn, stepped slightly in front of her, as if his small frame could offer protection. Tahunka raised his hand, and immediate silence fell. The authority he commanded was absolute. "I have made my decision," he announced, his voice carrying the finality of a chief's decree. "This woman will not be harmed, her bindings will be removed, and she will be given food and water. She will stay in our camp, not as a slave, but as a guest under my protection until I determine her ultimate fate." Gasps rippled through the gathered tribe members. Gray Bear stepped forward, his face contorted with anger and disbelief. "Tahunka, I have followed you through many battles. I have trusted your judgment even when it seemed strange. But this is too much. She is white. Her people kill us without mercy. And yet she showed mercy to one of ours," Tahunka countered firmly. "When did we become the people who punish compassion, Gray Bear? When did we lose the wisdom to distinguish between our true enemies and those who might be different?" He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled tribe. "I do not ask you to trust her. I ask you to trust me, your chief, as you have always done." The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Gray Bear gave a curt nod, though his expression remained thunderous. "I trust you, Tahunka, but I will be watching this white woman closely. One wrong move, and my patience will end." The chief acknowledged this with a slight nod before turning back to Sarah. He knelt down before her, bringing his face level with hers, and carefully began untying the rawhide bindings around her wrists. Sarah held her breath, barely daring to believe what was happening. As the tight strips fell away, she gasped at the sudden rush of blood back into her hands. Her wrists were raw and bleeding where the bindings had cut into her skin. Tahunka examined her injuries with a frown, then called out to someone in the crowd. An older woman emerged, her silver-streaked black hair braided with small bones and beads. She carried a leather pouch filled with medicinal herbs and salves. This was Whispering Wind, the tribe's healer, and one of the most respected women in the camp. Her face was lined with age and wisdom, and her eyes held a sharp intelligence that missed nothing. The healer knelt beside Sarah, taking the injured woman's hands in her own weathered ones. She clucked her tongue disapprovingly at the wounds, then began applying a cool, soothing paste that smelled of sage and something Sarah couldn't identify. The relief was immediate, and Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, not from pain, but from the unexpected kindness being shown to her. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "Thank you so much." Whispering Wind looked up at her, and though the language barrier remained, something passed between the two women. A moment of understanding, of shared humanity. The healer wrapped Sarah's wrists with soft strips of deerskin, her movements gentle and practiced. Then she produced a water skin and a small bundle of dried meat, offering them to Sarah with a slight nod. Sarah accepted the offerings with trembling hands, tears now flowing freely down her dusty cheeks. She drank deeply, the cool water like a blessing from heaven, then tore into the meat with desperate hunger. Little Hawk sat beside her, watching with satisfaction, as if personally responsible for this turn of fortune. Tahunka stood, addressing his son in Comanche. "Little Hawk, this woman showed you great kindness. It is now your responsibility to help her learn our ways, to teach her some of our language so she can communicate. Can you do this?" The boy's face lit up with pride and excitement. "Yes, father, I will teach her everything." As the crowd slowly dispersed, returning to their evening activities with much to discuss around their fires, Tahunka remained standing near Sarah. She looked up at him, wiping her tears with the back of her hand, and managed a genuine smile despite everything she had endured. "I don't know what you said to them," Sarah began softly, gesturing vaguely toward where the tribe members had been gathered. "But I can see you showed me mercy when you had every reason not to. My name is Sarah. Sarah Bennett." She placed her hand over her heart, repeating her name slowly. "Sarah." Tahunka studied her for a long moment, then placed his own hand over his chest. "Tahunka," he said, his deep voice carrying the weight of his name with pride. Then he pointed to his son. "Little Hawk, Little Hawk," Sarah repeated carefully, and the boy beamed at her pronunciation. She then pointed to herself again. "Sarah." She gestured to the chief and attempted to convey her gratitude through expression and tone. "Thank you, Tahunka. Thank you for your mercy, for your son's life, for everything." Though he couldn't understand her exact words, Tahunka recognized genuine gratitude when he heard it. He gave a single, solemn nod, then surprised Sarah by speaking in halting English. "You, kind, Little Hawk, hungry. You give food." His English was broken but understandable, learned through limited interactions with traders over the years. "Why?" Sarah considered the question carefully, understanding its significance. "Because he was hungry and I had food. Because he's a child and children should never go hungry if it can be prevented. Because..." She paused, searching for the right words. "Because kindness is never wasted, even when we're afraid." Tahunka absorbed her words, and Sarah could see something shift in his expression, a softening around his eyes, a barely perceptible relaxation in his shoulders. He studied her face as if seeing her clearly for the first time, noticing details beyond her status as a white captive. He saw the strength in her features despite the dirt and exhaustion, the intelligence in her green eyes, the genuine compassion that had prompted her to feed his son, even at great personal cost. "You stay near teepee," he said, gesturing toward a structure on the edge of the camp circle. "Sleep there, safe." He placed particular emphasis on the last word, and Sarah understood he was promising his protection. As darkness fell over the prairie and cooking fires began to glow like scattered stars across the encampment, Sarah found herself sitting outside the designated teepee with Little Hawk as her constant companion. The boy chattered away in Comanche, occasionally inserting English words he knew, teaching her phrases with the enthusiasm of a natural teacher. Other children approached cautiously at first, their curiosity overcoming their fear, and soon Sarah was surrounded by young faces eager to interact with the mysterious white woman their chief had spared. From his own teepee across the camp, Tahunka watched the scene unfold. He saw Sarah's patience with the children, her gentle manner, the way she made them laugh despite speaking different languages. He saw how Little Hawk had attached himself to her side, animated and happy in a way the chief hadn't witnessed since his wife's death. Something stirred in Tahunka's chest, an emotion he had thought buried forever beneath layers of grief and rage. Whispering Wind approached him, her knowing eyes following his gaze. "She is not what you expected, is she?" the healer asked quietly in Comanche. "No," Tahunka admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "She is not. Little Hawk has needed a mother's touch. The boy grows wild without it, like a young horse with no one to gentle him." Whispering Wind paused, choosing her next words carefully. "And you, great chief, have needed something to remind you that not all battles are fought with weapons, and not all enemies deserve our hatred." Tahunka turned to look at the elder woman, his expression conflicted. "She is white," Whispering Wind. "Her people have caused us nothing but suffering. And yet she gave her last food to your son," the healer countered gently. "Judge the individual, Tahunka, not just the race. That is true wisdom." The days that followed transformed the Comanche camp in ways no one could have anticipated. Sarah's presence, initially met with suspicion and hostility, gradually became woven into the fabric of daily life. She proved herself useful, helping the women with tasks like gathering water from the nearby stream, preparing hides, and tending the cooking fires. Though the language barrier remained significant, Sarah learned quickly, absorbing Comanche words and phrases with remarkable speed, aided by Little Hawk's enthusiastic tutoring and the surprising patience of several women who had begun to warm to her. Whispering Wind became an unexpected ally, teaching Sarah about medicinal plants and healing practices, while simultaneously learning about white medicine from the captive woman. Sarah shared knowledge of herbs and remedies her mother had taught her, creating a bridge of understanding through the universal language of healing. The two women would sit together for hours, grinding roots and mixing salves, communicating through gestures, simple words, and the growing respect between them. But it was the relationship developing between Sarah and Tahunka that truly shocked the tribe. The chief found himself drawn to the white woman in ways that both confused and intrigued him. He would watch her interact with Little Hawk, seeing how naturally maternal instincts flowed from her, how she had seamlessly filled a void in his son's life that had existed since his wife's passing. More than that, he found himself engaging in conversations with Sarah during the cool evenings, sitting by the fire as she practiced her Comanche, and he improved his English. "Tell me about your life before," Tahunka asked one evening, 3 weeks after Sarah's capture. They sat outside his teepee, Little Hawk already asleep inside, while the stars blazed overhead in spectacular display. "Why you travel alone?" Sarah gazed into the fire, memories flooding back. "I wasn't always alone. My parents died from fever last winter. They were good people. My father was a farmer, my mother a school teacher. After they passed, I had nothing left in Missouri. I heard there were opportunities in Texas, new settlements where a woman could perhaps teach school or start fresh." She laughed bitterly. "I suppose fate had different plans. Your parents, they teach you kindness?" Tahunka asked, genuinely curious. "Yes," Sarah replied softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "My mother especially. She always said that compassion costs us nothing but means everything to those who receive it. She believed that we're all human beings beneath our differences, that the color of our skin or the language we speak doesn't change the fundamental truth that we all feel pain, hunger, love, and hope." Tahunka was silent for a long moment, processing her words. "My wife, Little Hawk's mother, she believes similar things. Her name was Bright Morning Star. She see good in all people, even when they give no reason for it. When white man's sickness take her, I become angry, bitter. I think all white people are enemy, that they bring only death and suffering. And now?" Sarah asked quietly, turning to face him fully. The firelight danced across his strong features, highlighting the conflict still evident in his expression. "Now, I am confused," Tahunka admitted, a rare vulnerability showing through his warrior exterior. "You should be enemy. My heart should want revenge, but when I look at you, when I see you with Little Hawk, when I hear your words about kindness." He paused, searching for the right words in English. "I see person, not enemy. I see woman with good spirit, with brave heart. This makes me question everything I believe about white people." Sarah reached out slowly, hesitantly, and placed her hand over his. Tahunka stiffened momentarily at the contact but didn't pull away. Not all white people are good, just as not all Comanche are the same. There are bad people in every race, Tahunka, but there are also good ones. People who want peace, who want to live and love and raise their children in safety. I think your wife understood that, and I think deep down you do too. The chief looked down at their joined hands, his larger, calloused one encompassing her smaller, still healing one. Something shifted in that moment, a barrier crumbling between them. Sarah, he said, his voice rough with emotion, you make me feel things I think I never feel again. You make me remember what it is to hope, to see future beyond war and loss. Sarah's heart raced, understanding the significance of his words. I feel it too, she whispered. I never expected to find anything but fear here, but you've shown me honor, protection, and… She hesitated, then continued bravely, and something that feels like the beginning of love, as impossible as that seems. Their moment was interrupted by Gray Bear's harsh voice cutting through the night. The elder warrior approached the fire, his face twisted with anger, and several other warriors flanking him. Tahunka, this has gone too far. You sit here, holding hands with this white woman like she is one of us. Have you forgotten who you are? Have you forgotten what her people have done? Tahunka rose swiftly, his full height and presence commanding immediate attention. I have forgotten nothing, Gray Bear. Every scar on my body reminds me of our struggles. Every night I lie awake remembering my wife's death. But I have also learned something these past weeks, that hatred blinds us, that revenge consumes us until we become the very monsters we fight against. Monsters? Gray Bear spat. We defend our land, our way of life, and you would betray that for a white woman's pretty face. I betray nothing. Tahunka's voice rose like thunder, silencing the murmurs from tribe members who had emerged from their teepees at the commotion. I lead this tribe with wisdom and strength, as I always have. But wisdom means recognizing when our old ways of thinking no longer serve us. This woman has proven herself, not through words, but through actions. She gave food to my starving son. She has worked alongside our women without complaint. She has learned our language and our customs with respect. She has healed our sick alongside whispering wind. What more proof do you need that not all whites are our enemies? Another warrior stepped forward, his expression more thoughtful than Gray Bear's. But Tahunka, what you are suggesting, taking a white woman as your wife, this would change everything. How can we raid white settlements while our chief shares his teepee with one of them? How can we fight when the enemy sleeps among us? The question hung in the air, and Tahunka felt the weight of leadership pressing down upon him. This was the moment that would define not just his future, but potentially the future of his entire tribe. He looked at Sarah, who stood beside him now, her green eyes reflecting both fear and determination. Then he looked at his people, seeing the confusion, anger, and uncertainty written across their faces. You ask how we can fight? Tahunka said, his voice carrying across the camp. I say, what are we fighting for? We fight to preserve our way of life, yes. We fight to protect our families and our land. But if we fight only with hatred in our hearts, if we see all whites as enemies without exception, then we have already lost. We become no different than those who hunt us with blind hatred in their own hearts. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. I propose something different. I propose we seek peace, but from a position of strength and wisdom, not weakness. We have been at war for so long that we have forgotten there might be another path. Sarah has shown me that some whites can be trusted, that some seek coexistence rather than domination. If we continue on our current path, we will be destroyed. If not this year, then next year, or the year after. Our children will inherit nothing but ashes and memories. Gray Bear's face darkened further. So you would have us surrender? Become like the reservation Indians, dependent on white man's charity? Never! Tahunka's response was immediate and fierce. We surrender nothing, but we can choose our battles wisely. We can make alliances with those whites who prove themselves honorable. We can create a future where Little Hawk and all our children might live without constant war. He placed his hand on Sarah's shoulder. This woman represents a bridge between two worlds. If I take her as my wife, it will signal to other white settlers that we are capable of peace, that we judge individuals by their actions, not their race. Whispering Wind stepped forward from the crowd, her weathered face solemn. The chief speaks with wisdom beyond his years. I have watched this white woman carefully these past weeks, looking for any sign of deception or malice. I have found none. She has a healing spirit and a kind heart. If Tahunka believes she can help lead us toward a better future, then I support his decision. Slowly, other voices joined in support. Young mothers who had watched Sarah play gently with their children spoke up. Warriors who had observed her courage and willingness to learn their ways added their voices. Even some of the elders who had initially opposed her presence began to nod thoughtfully, swayed by Tahunka's vision and the evidence of their own eyes. Only Gray Bear and a handful of warriors remained staunchly opposed, but even they could see that the tide had turned. If this is truly your decision, Tahunka, Gray Bear said finally, his voice heavy with resignation, then as your warrior, I will accept it. But know that I do so with reservations, and I pray to the spirits that you are right. Tahunka nodded, acknowledging the elders' concerns. Your loyalty honors me, Gray Bear, even when we disagree. That is the mark of a true warrior, to follow your chief even when the path seems uncertain. The chief turned back to Sarah, taking both her hands in his. Sarah Bennett, you came to us as a captive, but you have become something far more precious. You have reminded me how to love, how to hope, how to imagine a future beyond endless war. Will you stay here, not as a prisoner, but as my wife? Will you be a mother to Little Hawk and share my life, my struggles and my dreams? Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. The impossibility of the situation wasn't lost on her. She had been a captive, facing an uncertain fate, and now she was being offered not just freedom, but love and a place of honor among people she had been taught to fear. Yet nothing about this felt wrong. In Tahunka, she had found a man of extraordinary courage, wisdom, and compassion. In Little Hawk, she had found a child who needed her love. In this tribe, she had found a community that, despite initial resistance, had opened their hearts to her. Yes, she said, her voice strong and clear, despite the tears streaming down her face. Yes, Tahunka, I will be your wife. I will be Little Hawk's mother. I will stand with you and your people, and I will do everything in my power to help build the bridge between our worlds that you envision. I love you, and I love your son, and I want nothing more than to share my life with both of you. A cheer rose from many in the crowd, particularly from the women and children who had grown fond of Sarah. Little Hawk, awakened by the commotion, burst from the teepee and ran to Sarah and his father, his young face confused but excited. Father, what is happening? Tahunka scooped his son up in one powerful arm while keeping his other arm around Sarah. Little Hawk, how would you feel if Sarah became your new mother? If she stayed with us forever, as part of our family? The boy's face lit up with pure joy. Really? Sarah would stay? She would be my mother? He threw his small arms around Sarah's neck, holding tight. Yes, yes, I want Sarah to be my mother. She teaches me words and tells me stories and makes me feel happy. Sarah hugged the child fiercely, her heart overflowing with love for this precious boy and his remarkable father. I would be honored to be your mother, Little Hawk. I promise to love you and protect you and teach you everything I know. The following days were filled with preparations for the wedding ceremony. Whispering Wind took charge of preparing Sarah according to Comanche traditions, creating a beautiful dress from the softest deerskin, decorated with intricate beadwork and dyed porcupine quills. The women of the tribe, even those who had initially been hostile, contributed to the preparations, each adding something special: a shell necklace, a feathered hair ornament, special moccasins decorated with symbols of love and unity. Sarah learned the Comanche marriage customs, practicing the ceremonial words she would need to speak. Tahunka, meanwhile, prepared gifts to present to his bride: a fine horse, beautifully crafted weapons for her protection, and a necklace he had made himself from turquoise stones and silver, traded from distant tribes. On the day of the ceremony, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple across the endless prairie, Sarah stood before Tahunka wearing her ceremonial dress, her auburn hair braided with flowers and feathers. The entire tribe gathered in a circle around them, and even Grey Bear attended, his expression neutral but no longer openly hostile. The ceremony was conducted by Whispering Wind, who spoke in both Comanche and English, honoring both cultures. We gather here to witness the joining of two souls who have found each other across the divide of different worlds. Tahunka, great chief of our people, warrior and protector, father and leader. Sarah, woman of courage and compassion, healer and teacher, one who proved herself worthy through actions, not words. Today they become one, and in their union, we see hope for a future where two worlds might coexist in peace and mutual respect. Tahunka spoke his vows in Comanche, his deep voice carrying clearly across the gathering. Sarah, you came into my life when my heart was closed by grief and anger. You opened it again with your kindness to my son, with your courage in facing an unknown future, with your willingness to see past old hatreds to the person beneath. I vow to protect you, to honor you, to love you for all the days the spirits grant me. I vow to build with you the future we both dream of, a world where our children can grow strong and free. Sarah responded in her still imperfect but heartfelt Comanche, then repeated in English, Tahunka, you showed me mercy when you could have shown cruelty. You saw my humanity when you could have seen only an enemy. You gave me not just survival, but a home, a family, and a love I never imagined I would find. I vow to stand beside you through whatever challenges come. I vow to be a good mother to Little Hawk and to any other children we might have. I vow to help build the bridge between our peoples, so that one day perhaps there can be lasting peace. They exchanged gifts, Tahunka presenting the turquoise necklace, which he carefully fastened around Sarah's neck, and Sarah offering him a carefully woven sash she had made with help from the women, incorporating both Comanche designs and patterns from her own culture, symbolizing their union of two worlds. As the ceremony concluded, Tahunka pulled Sarah into his arms and kissed her deeply, sealing their vows before their people. The crowd erupted in celebration, and the evening dissolved into feasting, dancing, and storytelling around massive bonfires that pushed back the darkness of the prairie night. Little Hawk stayed close to his father and new mother throughout the celebration, his happiness infectious. He had regained the light in his eyes that had dimmed after his birth mother's death, and everyone could see how the child blossomed under Sarah's loving care. As the celebration continued into the night, Sarah and Tahunka slipped away to their teepee, decorated with flowers and special symbols of blessing from the tribe. Inside, in the gentle glow of a small fire, they held each other close, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. Who would have thought, Sarah murmured against Tahunka's chest, that being captured would lead to finding everything I never knew I needed, a husband who sees my worth, a son to love, a people to belong to. Tahunka stroked her hair gently, his voice rumbling with emotion. The spirits work in mysterious ways. You were meant to be here, Sarah. You were meant to save Little Hawk that day, not just with food, but by bringing love back into our lives. You were meant to teach me that the path forward is not always the path of war. You were meant to be my wife, my partner, my equal in all things. What happens now? Sarah asked, looking up at him. Do you really think we can build this bridge between our peoples? Do you think there's truly hope for peace? I don't know, Tahunka admitted honestly. The path ahead will not be easy. There are whites who will never accept Indians as equals, just as there are Comanche who will never trust whites. But we have to try, Sarah. We have to believe that our love, our example, can inspire others to look beyond old hatreds. If we don't try, if we don't fight for a better future, then what hope do our children have? Sarah nodded, determination filling her heart. Then we'll try together. We'll face whatever comes as partners, as husband and wife, as bridge builders between two worlds. And maybe, just maybe, our children and grandchildren will live in a world where the color of someone's skin matters less than the content of their character. They sealed their commitment with a kiss, two souls from different worlds united by love, compassion, and a shared vision of a better future. Outside their teepee, the celebration continued, the tribe dancing and singing under the stars, no longer seeing the white woman among them as an outsider, but as one of their own, their chief's wife, Little Hawk's mother, and a symbol of hope for what might be possible when people choose understanding over hatred, love over fear, and unity over division. The journey that had begun with Sarah sharing her last food with a hungry child had transformed into something far greater, a love story that defied the boundaries of race and culture, and a hope that perhaps against all odds, two seemingly incompatible worlds might find a way to coexist in peace. As Sarah drifted off to sleep in Tahunka's arms, she thought of her parents and hoped they would be proud of the path she had chosen. She had found her place in the world, not in a white settlement as she had planned, but here among the Comanche as wife to their chief and mother to a wonderful boy. She had found her purpose, to be a living bridge between two worlds, to prove that love and compassion could overcome even the deepest divides. And in the years that followed, Sarah and Tahunka would indeed become instrumental in negotiating peace treaties and fostering understanding between their peoples. Their marriage became legendary, spoken of in both Comanche camps and white settlements as proof that coexistence was possible. Little Hawk grew into a fine young man, fluent in both languages and comfortable in both worlds, eventually becoming a powerful advocate for peace himself. But that was all yet to come. For now, in this perfect moment, there was only love, hope, and the promise of a future built together.